Let me put it this way. A lot of great horror movies that I love, that I grew up watching, have a tradition of being done under extreme duress of time and on very, very low budgets.
What I think we've all begun to realise in the last few years is that the best horror movies are the ones developed on a shoestring budget. Of course, you have your exceptions, for example the films of James Wan. However, for the most part, the best horror is created by directors who want to tell their stories because they're passionate about them, not so that they can gross $100 million at the box office. It Follows, Get Out, The Witch, and released exactly a decade ago, Frank Darabont's The Mist. Filmed over only 36 days on a modest budget of $17 million, The Mist is not just a great film, but in my opinion, an achievement. It captures the spirit of a classic 50s horror movie, but keeps it relevant to today's horror filmmaking age. It's a modern day B-movie. I think it's no wonder Frank Darabont pushed for a black and white version of The Mist to be released, considering his efforts to evoke an old-fashioned mentality. I think this is most evident if we look at the monsters in The Mist. Darabont spent 6 weeks with K&B Effects designing monsters which were faithful to the surprisingly concise Stephen King novella. He also enlisted the help of Greg Nicotero, who he'd later work with to develop AMC's Zombie Cash Cow.
The Walking Dead.
The two agreed that not only should the creatures remain faithful to Steve King, but they should harken back to the 50s monster mutation style, while seeming like they could be from our world, or an interdimensional neighbour, I mean.
We also wanted to do it in such a way that they felt like they could be real creatures.
This one foot in our reality design is all over the place in the classic movies that inspired The Mist. A lot of them feature monsters that are essentially mutations of animals, insects, reptiles that we see every day, not just upscaled but disfigured and experimented on. Even John Carpenter's The Thing seems to have inspired the creature design just as much as its 1951 counterpart, contributing that partly familiar, partly alien feel. Now, I won't talk too much about the modern techniques which Darabont employs. We don't need to be taught how to spot CGI, but I think for instance his use of a multicam setup, which he learned from being on set of the TV show The Shield, is a reason that this blend of old and new filmmaking techniques works so flawlessly.
The approach was thrilling because it was very documentary, very immediate, very in the moment, the kind of thing I had not ever done before.
Dated CGI isn't necessarily a problem because that's not what Darabont focuses his story on. Thankfully, the creatures, as terrific as they are just a means for Darabont to study his much more human monsters. I was surprised to learn that despite their budgets, the B-horror movies that inspired The Mist usually integrate some pretty significant themes and observations. For example, I noticed that a lot of the films position the audience to sympathise with the monster, either right off the bat or towards the climax of the film. They seem to comment on the cruelty and prejudice of human beings, just as the characters in The Mist slowly form allegiances, turn on each other, and even sacrifice one another to the creatures outside. Darabont has cited some other classic films as inspiration, describing The Mist as a thematic blend of Lord of the Flies and a monster movie. Darabont is not just aware but intentional in his tight-knit study of human fear and paranoia.
This sort of Lord of the Flies dynamic of what happens when people are put into a pressure cooker of fear and panic.
He has also compared The Mist to Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat. Again, not from a genre point of view, and definitely not for the monsters, but for the claustrophobic location and personal investigation of human beings. I personally see similarities yet again with The Mist and John Carpenter's The Thing, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. What Darabont no doubt realised is that the modest budget of The Mist could be used as a tool to create a character-driven story. Just like Spielberg and his malfunctioning shark in 1975 make the monster a means to an end, an object to allow well-defined, three-dimensional characters to carry the film. Another motif I noticed in the film is the mysterious origins of the creatures. The military project codenamed Arrowhead that the characters refer to me, seems more than anything like a metaphor for human error. Frankenstein, Godzilla, these two and more represent what can go wrong when human beings play God, something we know Mrs. Carmody isn't a fan of.
We are being punished for what? For going against the will of God.
The irony of this surely didn't escape Darabont, that the humans are being hunted by the creatures which they let loose. Now, the religious themes in The Mist seem to be a result of more modern horror patterns. Perhaps religion was not something easily questioned even in the 1950s. For that reason, I can't discuss the inspiration for the religious aspects of the film as easily, but like the creatures, religion is only a means to an end. It is used in the film not to have a direct influence over the plot, but to influence character traits, beliefs, and actions, to create an antagonist. In his novel The Anatomy of Story, John Truby writes that a true opponent not only wants to prevent the hero from achieving his desire, but is competing with the hero for the same goal. On the surface, it may not seem like Mrs. Carmody and David Drayton are fighting for the same spot in the limelight, as David is only interested in protecting his friends while Carmody wants to control the whole supermarket. However, from the detailed study of both characters that Darabont provides for us, we know that both are only searching for some solution to the mist, some end to this nightmare. This examination of human nature, for me, allows The Mist to surpass so many of today's horror films. The best way I know to compliment it lies in Darabont's inspiration for the film. It's a modern day B-movie. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something about The Mist because I really do love this movie. I'm working on more and more projects lately, so subscribe to see those as soon as they're up on here.